Football on Saturday. You better believe we'll be switching between our Texas Longhorns, Hook'em But let's go ahead and let's dive into the questions that we have on the site. And also, of course, we can look at some of the recent news because surprisingly, there is a little bit of news that we should discuss. The main thing is going to be regarding Deontay Johnson, expected to be claimed off the waiver wire. Obviously, you did have Deontay get cut by the Baltimore Ravens. I want to say yesterday. So the potential landing spots, Chargers, Chiefs, you could very easily see him helping both teams. Obviously, from a fantasy football perspective, we're in the semifinals. The finals are next week. So is there any world in which you're going to go through and you're going to be picking up Deontay Johnson? Nope, you got him. You cut him. Not too much to discuss on that front. Kirk Cousins expected to be released by the Falcons before the $10 million bonus due March 17th. So it is officially Michael Penix time in Dynasty. And I know a lot of people got upset with us. This is funny. Everybody always, like Dynasty especially, or during the redraft offseason. Y'all know a big thing that I always do is I look at historical data. I try to say, okay, historically, this is what happens. And we looked at Michael Penix being drafted inside the top 10 picks, and we said we had never seen a quarterback ever get drafted inside the top 10 picks and not get a chance at the starting job. In at least by their second season. Now, everybody wanted to point at the Cousins contract and go, oh my gosh, yada, yada, yada. Well, Kirk Cousins isn't even going to be on the team next year. Wheels up for Michael Penix in Dynasty. Super excited to see him this weekend. Aiden O'Connell, not listed on the injury report for week 16. So maybe you bump up Myers, maybe you bump up Bowers. Tyreek still listed as questionable. We have no updates there. Isaac Rindo ruled out. We knew that a while ago. And Cade Otton is going to be doubtful for week 16. So if you were planning on going with Otton, you are going to have to look for a different option. We don't have any clarity on Tony Pollard. Zach Charbonnet removed from the injury report. And I actually saw that Zach Charbonnet as well was listed as a team captain, which maybe does make you a little bit more interested to start him. But I don't know. Again, I think it's probably going to be a running back by committee in Seattle, with Walker having the majority of the usage. And I would rather, if we're looking at, say, Patrick Taylor versus Zach Charbonnet, I'd rather start Patrick Taylor over Zach Charbonnet. But obviously, it is going to be up to the options that you have. But real quick, let's go through and let's dive into these questions. We have a couple team reviews that we had pushed off. Very sorry, MRD. Long-time member of the vlog. Let me hook you up with we're going into the Dynasty offseason. Well, one, hook you up with a free trade question, hook you up with a free start set question as well, just in case you have anything next week. And also, let me hook you up with a second free trade question. We got a long Dynasty offseason approaching. So you should have 2 free trade questions, a free start set question sitting there for you as well. But it says, is there anything I can do to lock in the win for the year? Don't know whether to try to trade for a tight end. Also, don't know whether or not to bench Debo. So tight end, we are currently sitting with Hunter Henry. We already have moved off our 2025 first. So we are really centered in and pushing to win this season, especially if you're going to look at the fact that this is a team where, we do have some of these assets that should be on the decline. Like Derrick Henry at 31 years old, probably not going to be as good as Derrick Henry was this year. So Derrick Henry going to be worth less next year than he was this year. You can almost say the same thing about Javonte Williams, where I'd kind of be surprised if Javonte Williams is a running back that you can start next season. We go over and we look at wide receiver. Debo Samuel's going to be another year older. Keenan Allen's going to be another year older. It is very difficult imagining that we're going to be able to start these guys in 2025 either. So definitely a team that is centered around winning this season. And understandable that we traded away our 2025 first to get us here. We do have the most dynasty value in this league, primarily centered around the fact that we are currently sitting with the combo of Josh Allen as well as Lamar Jackson. You're sitting with 2 of the best 5 assets that you can get in dynasty superflex leagues. And this is what gives you such an advantage to win this year, as well as for years to come, of course. Going over and looking at what we have with running back, Derrick Henry, Tracy, Javonte. I mean, we can wrap up this season with this group. I mean, especially now that we have Patrick Taylor at the very bottom, I would actually prefer to go ahead and start Patrick Taylor over Tyrone Tracy if you had to make the decision between the two of these guys this week. Obviously, we need to move Patrick Taylor up dramatically in our dynasty ranks here. But nonetheless, I mean, I think that running back, it looks like we should be able to get by the next few weeks. Wide receiver, we have these cornerstone assets that can help us contend in the short term, as well as we can build around in the long term, such as Brian Thomas, Garrett Wilson, Jordan Addison. I mean, these are wide receivers that should hold value going into 2025. With Deebo Samuel, obviously, it is a spot in which you would say you probably want to bench him in a regular redraft league where you only start 2 receivers in a flex. However, specifically here, if this is a start 10 Superflex 12-team dynasty league, like your 10 start, say, Josh Allen, Lamar, Henry, Tracy, Patrick Taylor, Brian Thomas, Garrett Wilson, Jordan Addison, I would start Keenan over Deebo and then Hunter Henry at tight end. So honestly, yeah, I think I would bench Deebo Samuel in favor of Patrick Taylor with this squad. And then if you wanted to go out there and if you wanted to make a trade to pick up an additional tight end, I mean, you can if you really wanted to. Like, we can go through and we can look at some of these teams that maybe are having to pivot over to a rebuild. This team's 10 and 18. They don't have a tight end that can really help us this year. Let's go through. This team's 1 and 27. They don't have a tight end that's really going to help us. This team is 9 and 19. They have Kittle and Kelsey. I mean, if you could potentially send, say, like a second rounder and Hunter Henry to go get to George Kittle, I think that could make a lot of sense, especially with this team having Mike Evans. I mean, Evans drafted back in 2014. Deebo drafted in 2019. There's a chance as well you could swap, like, say, Deebo for Evans. Go Deebo and Henry for Evans and Kittle and just give them the younger options. We take the older options. They're 9 and 19, and maybe they're a little bit more excited about that value for the long term. I mean, if you can pick up a tight end for the super cheap like that, 100% go ahead and do it. But fundamentally, you are going to be fine having Hunter Henry, who you can play. Henry has absolutely dominated target volume. Like, let me go through and let me pull up what we actually have with Underdog picks at the moment with like the projections that you have with Hunter Henry. Because obviously a big thing is just thinking about the next few weeks, right? We don't necessarily want to care too much about the long term when we're looking at this. Hunter Henry is higher, lower, 42.5 receiving yards. It's going to be one of the higher marks that you have from effectively really any tight ends this week. And I'm assuming almost next week as well. Keep in mind, there aren't too many viable tight ends at this point. The guys you thought were going to be good, like Kyle Pitts, turned out to be bums. You've had some tight ends get injured, like Ingram. It's like, I mean, even Mark Andrews is higher, lower, 33.5 receiving yards. Not saying Henry's going to be better than Andrews. I'm just saying realistically, it's not like Hunter Henry is going to be a bum here. You are getting some target volume. So I think if you were to go through and make a trade for a tight end, again, it would be with that team down here that's 9 and 19. And we pick up Kittle, the guy that was drafted back in 2017. And that's already in his 30s. So you can see a rebuilding team wanting to get off of him. But again, I'm not going to be going out there and paying a tremendous amount for him. Like, the last thing you're doing is going through and like trading Garrett Wilson. But I really appreciate you, of course. And I did hook you up with that free start sit question. A couple free trade questions as well, just in case you have anything else that you would want us to look at. I'd be super happy to dive into it for you, my guy. But real quick, Sergio says, Mason, are you starting Purdy in the Flock League or are you starting Stafford? I can go ahead and pull this up. I'd love to get y'all's opinion on this as well, even though I'll say when I've asked for y'all's opinion in the past, y'all may or may not have screwed me. But anyway, looking at my matchup this week, I was planning on going with a Brock Purdy. Did I drop Stafford? I guess I don't even have Stafford. I was planning on going Purdy. I had Penix. I don't remember these moves. I could pick up Stroud. I could pick up Stafford if I wanted to instead. My thought process is Purdy has the rushing upside. I don't know if the passing volume is going to be super, super different. So can y'all please spam the chat? Would y'all start Brock Purdy or Matthew Stafford this week? Looking at the underdog picks, you have Brock Purdy currently higher, lower 240.5 passing yards. You have some rushing upside here as well. Higher, lower 13.5 rushing yards. I feel like Purdy's hit this a ton, no? And then I also have Hollywood Brown. How crazy would it be if I started Hollywood this week? But, looking at Purdy, I thought he had been running more than, deemed 14.5 rushing yards. I guess over the past 3 weeks, he hasn't run at all since the injury. Before that, he was hitting 14.5 rushing yards pretty much every single week. Do they have Purdy at higher, lower 17.35 fantasy points? Whereas Stafford is higher, lower 243.5 passing yards, but you don't have the rushing upside. Michael Penix, they have higher, lower 226.5 passing yards, down here at 16.5 points. So yeah, I'm probably planning on going with Brock Purdy. We got Purdy, Stafford, Purdy. I don't know. Hopefully Purdy runs the ball a little bit more. Decent projections with the both offenses. I will say you do have a higher total with the Rams offense, though. Now, let's move this over to our next team. Coming out from TJ says, looking to figure out my options for running back wide receiver this week. I thought about picking up Miller. Also, I want to swap Jennings with Ladd or Moore. Well, I would have 100% played Ladd over Jennings. That's for damn sure. If you wanted to swap out Juwan Jennings, I have Juwan Jennings ranked ahead of DJ Moore. For me, yeah, I would 100% go with Jennings over Moore. Jennings, even in the dud game that you had this past week, still had 9 targets. He still has really cemented himself as the guy in terms of the target volume in San Francisco. Deebo Samuel has cemented himself as a certified bum. So 100%, yeah, I would go with Jennings there over DJ Moore. Looking at what we have with the quarterback situation, we're rolling with Darnold against Seattle. Completely fine spot. Wide receiver, we have Lamb, Puka at the very top. With Ladd McConkey have already played. Derrick Henry, Jerome Ford. I think Ford's a decent play this week, considering the fact that, you are in a really good matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. You have Andrews at tight end. Yeah, the only thing I'd swap with this team is I would go ahead and I'd play Juwan Jennings over DJ Moore. And I wouldn't bother picking up Kondre Miller with this team. If you're looking at Miller, yeah, he should have effectively every single touch in his backfield this week. But again, the receiving usage isn't exactly going to be there. You are effectively just banking on him coming through and giving you a touchdown in what projects to be the lowest scoring offense in the league this week, which I don't want to touchdown or bust running back in a bad offense. So I think you leave the lineup as is, but I think you actually pivot from Moore to Jennings. But let me hook you up with a free start set question, just in case you have anything you want to follow up next week. Now, Sheriff Roscoe coming through. Running back, we're choosing between Miller, Taylor, Pacheco. We have no Kamara. Again, I do want to reiterate, if you are looking at Miller, this is a running back that does not have receiving upside and what projects to be the worst offense in the NFL. So for me, I would steer clear. Pacheco has been operating in a running back by committee. And for that reason, I'm just going to take Patrick Taylor. I'm going to take the running back that, it does seem like he is going to be the guy in San Francisco. Do they have an underdog pick of Patrick Taylor up? Holy crap. Am I too high on Patrick Taylor here? They have Patrick Taylor higher, lower, 34.5 rushing yards. What are they projecting in terms of the running backs here against Miami? Who else is supposed to get work? They have Patrick Taylor higher lower 34.5 rushing yards. Do they even have another running back out here with the projections? Let me pull this up. It's not like Juszczyk's going to be getting much. Drew says, look at the Deebo Samuel rushing yards. Deebo, they have higher lower 11.5 rushing yards. Are they thinking Izzy's going to do something? If y'all don't know, Izzy's a running back that got waived by the Jets. Niners claimed him. Based off this projection alone, I don't want to start Patrick Taylor. But literally based off this projection alone, I'm not starting Patrick Taylor. I'd rather go Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, that's the big reason why I trusted Isaac Grindo when I finally came around to him, his first game playing like 2 weeks back, is looking at the underdog projections. We had never seen Grindo be the starting running back, and they immediately projected Grindo to have like higher, lower 82.5 total yards. To see Patrick Taylor sitting there with the projection of higher, lower 34.5 total yards, I'm sorry, I pivot to Pacheco. But let me just double check. Yeah, we're not want to start either of those players. Yeah, I think we leave the rest as is. But crazy to see how low the projections are with Patrick Taylor. But I guess maybe they are projecting it to be a committee now, and Taylor may not be a feature back. Seth coming through. Wide receiver, pretty easy spot to just go ahead. And I know people are going to hate to say this. You got to start Jennings. Do we have any viable running backs in the flex? Hell, after that, I'm not wanting to start Patrick Taylor in the flex. I think you go with Devonta Smith. And I'm going to go probably Jordan Addison. I mean, if we're looking at Shakir versus Addison or Shakir versus Smith or Shakir versus Jennings, again, I know Shakir's been a high-end wide receiver 3 this year. I think he's the wide receiver 25 in fantasy points scored. He had his first game with more than 20 fantasy points like 2 weeks back. But Shakir's been a high-end wide receiver 3 so far this year in total fantasy points scored. And a lot of those games, you've had no Keon Coleman. You've had no Amari Cooper. You've had no Dalton Kincaid. So now that all those players are back in, the issue is the targets are just going to be dispersed through so many different players. Whereas like Jennings, Smith, and Addison, these are all very concentrated offenses. So I would actually bench Shakir out of that group. Now, Fatty coming through says, please help. Looking forward to week 17. I want to, but I'm just terrified about this week myself, my friend. But we are going to go Kyron and Jacobs here relatively easily at running back. I mean, you have the safe 3-down workloads in good offenses. Wide receiver, we're going to be going with Lamb, Tyreek Hill very, very easily. Tight end between Hawkinson and Andrews. This is going to be close. You have had Andrews running extremely hot with touchdowns so far this season. Hawk is higher, lower 42.5 receiving yards, higher, lower 8.75 fantasy points. Going over and looking at Andrews, who's been better this year. Andrews is down higher, lower 7.45 fantasy points, just simply doesn't have the same target volume or big playability as Hawkinson. If you go over and you look at my tight end rankings on the site, I do have Hawkinson 1 tier ahead of Andrews as well. So despite Andrews being the better option so far this season, I'm going to roll with Hawk. And then down here in the flex, I'm going to go with Rico Dowdle over Kenneth Walker. Now that Charbonnet's been named the team captain, I do really think it's going to be a running back by committee in Seattle. Now, Tiro Burt says bench is Henry Nico this week to play the better matchup. You for sure go Nico at wide receiver, even if it's a tough matchup against KC. Tight end, you for sure go Kittle over Hawkinson. And then down here on the bench, I guess you're considering, are we playing Devontae Adams? I mean, or maybe your question is like, do we bench Derrick Henry for Bucky Irving? No, I think you just leave Bucky on the bench, leave Kupp on the bench. You're playing Adams here. You're playing Nico here. And yeah, definitely play Derrick Henry. I know it's a tough matchup, of course, going for Nico Collins against the Chiefs, where you actually have the Texans projected out to be a bottom 3 offense in the league this week. And at the same time, you're in a spot in which you actually do have a Derrick Henry going up against the Steelers, but the Ravens are like 6-point favorites. They should be in a fine spot. Now, Nelson says, not sure to flex Laporta, Taylor, or Ridley. So this is Patrick Taylor. Honestly, I think none of the above. I almost just want to say Jerome Ford. I mean, I had Taylor ranked higher in my flex rankings, but again, I know this is maybe me overreacting, but for them to have Taylor higher lower at 34.5 rushing yards. Jerome Ford here is higher lower 75.5 total yards. Ford has the better matchup. I know Ford's going to catch the ball as well. So to be honest with you, actually I had Jerome Ford ranked higher anyway in my flex rankings. What the hell am I talking about? Yeah, I think Ford is a completely fine play. Trust me, based off my flock team, based off my underdog teams, I'm setting up a prayer that Laporta is the highest scoring flex option there, but there's no way we can roll with Laporta. You go with Jerome Ford, 3-down running back, and what projects to be a really, really good matchup against the worst defense in the league. Now, here going over to Joey's question, we're looking at Russ, Bryce Young, Caleb, Michael Penix for the super flex. I'm going to go with Caleb based off how high the over-under is against Detroit with Detroit's banged-up defense. I'm going over to running back Chase Brown, just a locked and loaded top 5 RB at this point with zero hesitation. And then going down to the flex spot, you're really choosing between Joe Mixon and Brian Thomas here. Obviously, Brian Thomas much better last week, and Brian Thomas does have a phenomenal matchup this week. But for me, I'm going to keep it stupid simple. I'm going to go with the 3-down running back with Joe Mixon, who's been an absolute crusher with volume all season. But I don't love the matchup, of course, going up against the Chiefs. Now, Michael coming through. Running back, we are starting. This is tough. I mean, definitely not going to go with Pacheco. Definitely not going ETN. Definitely not going Jerome Ford. You're looking at Brees, Aaron Jones, Bucky. With Brees, he played fewer than 50% of the snaps this past week. I have him ranked back-to-back with Bucky Irving. What wide receivers would we consider in the flex? Khalil Shakir. So honestly, frankly, it doesn't matter. You're just going to play all 3 running backs. The 3 guys that we would consider between Brees Hall, Aaron Jones, and Bucky Irving are pretty much auto locks here. I'm not playing Ford over him. Pacheco's operating in a committee, at least he has over the past 3 weeks. Shakir, again, he's the wide receiver 25 in total fantasy points this season. So I think it's easy to just take the dynamic backs here. Now, Uzer coming through. Running back, we're looking at Patrick Taylor, Jalen Warren, Alexander Madison, Tyler Algier, Trey Benson. I think here's a range where you can take the risk and you can go with Patrick Taylor and you can say, what if he is the true 3-down back? What if they give him that Isaac Rindo, that Jordan Mason level workload? Going over to wide receiver, we're going to go Terry McLaurin over Downs despite the tough matchup against Philly. Tight end, we're going to go Hawkinson over Njoku with Njoku banged up. And then down in the 2 flex spots, here's where it gets a little bit difficult. I actually think I probably personally end up going with the receivers with Downs and Debo. Debo's been a straight up bum. Like, nobody's going to deny that. If you wanted to go with Madison instead, you could. I guess especially now that you have Aiden O'Connell good to go. But my thing is, like, what's the true ceiling that you're going to get with Alexander Madison in this offense? Like, Madison is currently sitting at higher lower 9.65 fantasy points. Debo with maybe an expanded rushing share in San Francisco with all the injured running backs. If you look at my flex rankings that we put out last night, I did have Madison ahead of Debo, though. Can y'all please spam the chat? Would you rather have Alexander Madison or Debo Samuel this week? Alexander Madison or Debo Samuel? Please let me know who you're going with. Okay. Waiting. Debo, Debo, Madison, Madison. Madison, Debo. Debo, neither. Debo, Madison, Debo, neither. I mean, what's your other option? Jalen Warren against the Ravens? Full PPR format, I think you'd go Debo Samuel, but it is incredibly close between the two. And obviously, we're not super excited about either. But Nicholas coming through, we need to choose a quarterback between Rodgers, Tua, Penix, and Stroud. Definitely can't go Stroud with the Texans projecting out as a bottom 3 offense in the league this week. Tua, you do have the Dolphins projected to have a little bit of a bounce back here in comparison to what they did this past week. And you do have the large sample with Tua as well. So I think Tua would be my guy here at quarterback. And if we were going to go with the number 2 option, I think we'd end up going with Rodgers. But almost no part of me wants CJ Stroud this week against the Chiefs. Now, Don Spin says, don't know about Charbonnet or Najee. I have Najee Harris with my own team, and I need to make sure. Oh, let me ask y'all's opinion on this as well. Because here's the decision that I have to make. Am I going with Najee or Ramondre Stevenson? As of now, I'm planning on Ramondre. I want nothing to do, and I mean nothing to do with Najee Harris. Like, Najee Harris plays a season low snap rate last week after fumbling. You do have him as a massive dog in this game against. We have 2 votes for Ramondre, 1 vote Najee, myself. For me, if I had Charbonnet, I'd easily play Charbonnet over Najee Harris. There's no part of me that wants Najee in. And with that same tune, I'll just take Calvin Ridley, especially in a full PPR format, and we'll just get the safe receptions here, down here in the flex spot. Now, K-Gain says, worried about McLaurin, Judy, and Njoku this week. So what's the most recent update that we have with David Njoku here? Again, I wouldn't be super excited about Njoku almost regardless because you have no Winston. So David Njoku is still questionable. I mean, he came close to playing this past week. Njoku would have a great matchup if he were to play. But you have no Winston, so the passing volume is probably lower. So I'd rather just have Andrews anyway. And then if we're looking at McLaurin, you have to play him despite the tough matchup. I don't necessarily think you can get away from it. And then going down to the flex, I think you have to play Jerry Jeudy. I agree. You 100% should go through and look for any other options you can now that you no longer have Winston under center. Like, the passing volume in Cleveland will dramatically decline. I'm not telling anybody to be excited about playing Jeudy here. But, I mean, if your other option is to go ahead and get in Michael Pittman, definitely not feeling good about that. Now, Drowsy coming through quarterback. We're looking at Love or Darnold. I think you just go ahead and you take Darnold. Love's in a spot in which the spread on the game's 13.5 points. They're just going to be running it consistently. And down in the 2 flex spots, it's a full PPR format. So for me, I would take the 2 receivers. I would go with Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison. You can consider Jamison Williams here, of course. My thing is, I just don't necessarily know if the Bears offense will be able to keep up with the Lions, how we saw Buffalo last week. So full PPR format, give me the receivers. DeAndre Swift, tough game environment. And Ramondre Stevenson, 14-point spread against the Bills. Now, Isaiah says, with Waddle out, should we consider Debo or McMillan or possibly picking up Malik Washington? I would definitely not play Malik Washington until you actually see him on the field. If you're in a dynasty league and pick him up off the waiver wire, of course you go out there and grab him, but I'm sure you can't. For me, and I've said this a couple times, and every time we've ever said it, we've been proven horribly wrong. But I mean, I'd imagine that they maybe are forced to get some involvement with Debo Samuel. They have no running backs left. You have no Ayuk. I mean, there's nobody in this offense. So I would go ahead. I would play Debo Samuel over Jalen McMillan. Now, of course, if you tell me that the Bucs are going to drop 40 points again, then clearly it's going to be Jalen. But I think you maybe see some regression in for this offense. Now, Slavic coming through. We need a wide receiver, tight end, and a flex. Wide receiver here, I'm assuming you did not start Ladd McConkey. So if we didn't start Ladd, I think you're going to go London. Tight end, we go Kittle. And down in the flex, we're definitely going to go back to wide receiver. I think you go ahead and you play JSN. If you wanted to go Bowers over JSN, I'm not going to fault you for it. But for me, I'm always leaning with the wide receiver over tight ends. But Aiden O'Connell coming in obviously should make things a little bit better for Bowers here. Now, Devoted coming through says opponent has Gibbs. Goff over Lamar, question mark, and then play DK, question mark. Nope. Do not overthink it. Just if you have Lamar Jackson, you play Lamar Jackson. Stupid simple. I don't care who your opponent has. And then you can't play Jalen McMillan here over DK Metcalf. I think you have to play DK. I'm starting DK Metcalf in the flex this week. It absolutely sucks. Trust me. I understand that this dude has been a bum. I understand that we shouldn't be super excited to get DK Metcalf in. But ultimately, it's a spot in which it seems like Geno is going to be healthy. Not only is Geno going to be healthy, but at the same time, we have seen a tremendous amount of points be scored by the wide receiver position against the Niners. Mainly a lot of garbage time, yada, yada, yada. But they're not going to run the ball against Minnesota. It is going to be through the air, presumably with, hopefully, DK Metcalf. Hopefully. But more likely than not, JSN, of course. Now, Blueberry Calories says, need an upside play. I'm also starting the Minnesota defense. So looking at this, I think you're going to go ahead. You're going to take Kenneth Walker, even if you're going up against Minnesota, unless this is one of those scenarios where it's like, Mason, I'm projected to lose by 30. It's really just a Hail Mary. And in that case, obviously, you're kind of hedging your bets, playing your running back against your DST. But 9 times out of 10, I just want to take the guy who has the highest median projection here, regardless of who our DST is. So I think we're just going to go ahead and take Kenneth Walker. And then down in the flex spot, I mean, you go ahead and you take Jackson Smith and Jigba. But again, unless it's a situation in which you're saying, hey, I am down by 40 in a 2-week playoff, and I really just need to be going ceiling. And then in that case, if you wanted to pivot off of the Seattle guys and maybe go with Brian Robinson and Zay Flowers, you can. But, I mean, these are the best names that you can get in general from your team. We'll be going with Walker and JSN. Now, Dignom coming through. Quarterback, we don't have one to choose from. A running back, we are looking at Pacheco versus Mixon. We're definitely going to go with Mixon. A wide receiver, I'm going to go Kupp over Shakir and McMillan. Tight end, you don't have anybody for us to choose from. And then down in the flex between these options, I probably do go ahead and end up, it's either going to be Pacheco or Shakir. I think you go with Shakir in a full PPR format. And then if you're in a spot in which you needed to start, say 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex, then our second running back we start would be Isaiah Pacheco. We would start Shakir at wide receiver 2, and then our flex spot would probably be Najee Harris, but we would hate it. Now, Squid coming through. We need a single flex between Brian Robinson, Dowdle, and Adam Thielen. I'm relatively easily going to be taking Dowdle here. Actually kind of surprised to see what the over-under looks like in this game against Tampa. Like, the offense should be decent here in Dallas. And if you're looking at Rico Dowdle in game environments where it's been close and the Cowboys offense has been able to move the ball down the field, he's had 20 plus opportunities every game over the past 4 weeks. So I think go ahead and you take Dowdle kind of as an easy start. Now, Caliphate says, can you go over the lineup? Debating on the receivers to start between Hill, Jennings, Smith, and Addison. So let's look at the best options that we have down here on the bench at the moment. So I would say if you wanted to get anybody into your lineup from your bench, you can consider Charbonnet versus Pacheco. You can consider Addison and Smith versus Jennings. These 3 wide receivers you have to start. But that's really the only conversations that you can have. Obviously, we're starting Hurts. You obviously start Taylor. You start London, Higgins, Tyreek, and Bowers with 0 hesitation. For me, with how I ranked these guys this week, I had Jennings at 38 in my flex ranks. I had Addison at 47. I had Devonta Smith at, I don't even know. Where did we put Smith? I had Smith at 40. So I have Jennings as the highest ranked player in my own rankings. I have Smith and Jennings extremely close. Maybe we can see what the underdog projections are. They have Smith higher, lower, 51.5 receiving yards. Jennings higher, lower. Okay, they have Jennings with just simply way higher than these other options. Jordan Addison, I have in a bunch of underdog drafts. So I would love Addison to come out big. But yeah, so they have Juwan Jennings as the very easy call here between the three of them. And then Zach Charbonnet was named team captain here for Seattle. So maybe that gives us some indication that they're really going to plan on using him. But the thing is, you go over and look at underdog. He's higher, lower, 17.5 rushing yards. So honestly, they're projecting him out as if he is somebody that you cannot play whatsoever. So I think you'll leave this lineup as is. Now, Jack Imbarak says, Marv, Amir, Tank, Madison, or should we pick up somebody like Britton Strange for the flex? No. Strange, yeah, looked good this past week. I mean, Strange was really good this past week, had the target volume, had everything you'd want to see, but it was a game environment in which Mac Jones had a ton of passing volume. Mac Jones looked great. Can we be super confident that that's going to be the case again this next week? Probably not. And at the same time, you have a large sample early in the year with Strange, with no Evan Ingram, where he didn't do much. Now, of course, you also had Christian Kirk playing back then, so maybe it's a little bit different. But for me, I think that I would still go ahead. I would take Marvin Harrison. Harrison's been wildly inconsistent, but you have really good projections for this offense this week. Now, of course, you can also say that the Cardinals presumably are going to run the ball a ton, which is a fair point. But I mean, we can even go through and we can look at the projections on Underdog. They have Marvin Harrison higher, lower, 50.5 receiving yards. And they have Strange down there, higher, lower, 37.5 receiving yards, and extremely unlikely to score the touchdown. So yeah, I think you have to go Harrison over Strange. Strange is like a fine tight end play if you really needed him. But for your flex, frankly, I'm not considering it. Now, Seymour Nutt says 6-point passing touchdown. A-Rod or Love. You have the Packers offense projected to be the second highest scoring offense in the league this week. The only concern I have is I think a lot of those points are going to come on the ground. But I still do have Love over Rodgers based off how good the offense should be. And then we're going to go Kenneth Walker here relatively easily in that flex spot, despite it being a tough matchup against Minnesota. Again, I want to say, oh, what if Charbonnet has a role? But right now on Underdog, Charbonnet is higher, lower, 17.5 rushing yards. So I'm not too concerned. But we got Danny in the chat. And yes, sir, I am ready for the Nico 30-point bomb. Danny has a bunch of teams still left in Best Ball Mania. Danny absolutely crushed it. Your boy has 3 of them left, but we both have a considerable amount of teams that have Nico Collins left in BBM. So we're rooting for a big Nico week this week. Big Nico week for sure. And Michael coming through with our next question. Running back, we're looking at Montgomery, Kamara, both being listed as out. So really it's Patrick Taylor or Kendre Miller. Again, here, let me ask Danny's question on this. Dear God, I did not know there were 539 teams in the final. That is an insane amount. But Danny, what are you thinking about the Niners backfield? Like, can you start Patrick Taylor? Like I had Patrick Taylor ranked over Miller initially because my thought process is like, oh, okay, well, we know Miller's not going to catch the ball and the Niners offense should score way more points. But then you go over and you look at Taylor, higher, lower, 34.5 rushing yards versus Miller, higher, lower, 54.5 rushing yards. Again, I think Taylor's more likely to see the touchdown, and I don't think Miller is going to have anything as a receiver. And Miller is, again, projected to be in the worst offense in the league this week. Danny has Taylor ranked as RB26. Would you go Taylor or Miller? As Isaiah Davis is a no-go. Amir Abdullah, I don't think he can play. Teresa says Miller will be hurt by halftime. That is always a concern. Here, I will say real quick, for the flex, you're definitely leaving it as is. I had Taylor ranked higher in my flex ranks. It sounds like Danny's on Taylor here as well. Again, I think you're more likely to get the touchdown with Miller. I'm never excited about a touchdown or bust running back that's in a horrendous offense. And that's what I think Miller is. Now, Scissors, always happy to see you, my friend. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question for next week. And also, I guess, a free trade question because I know we got the Dynasty offseason approaching soon. Sit one between London, Bucky, Hubbard, and JSN. You have to start Hubbard. In my mind, I'm starting London over JSN. It's really going to be down between JSN and Bucky Irving. Clearly, we sit Ford and Miller in this instance. Bucky is still splitting with Rachaad White, but it has been just a phenomenal Bucks offense, and it's projected to stay that way this week. JSN, I think, has had now 7 weeks in a row being the wide receiver one in Seattle in terms of fantasy points scored. It's a half PPR format. I think that honestly kind of swings me over to the running back. I have Bucky at 34. I have JSN at 36. So I have Bucky ranked out of JSN, and Danny coming through to Seattle apparently has some weather concerns. Bucky is a prime matchup with the highest over-under of the slate. So, yeah, Danny's on Bucky as well. And Danny, you're more than welcome to join this live stream. More than welcome. I don't know if y'all have your own going on, but let's go ahead and move this over. Now, these are the questions we currently have in the queue. But Dart coming through says, happy BR, should we start 3 running backs or 3 receivers? A running back, I think you're going to end up starting 3 of these guys. I think you have to start Chuba Hubbard and James Cook, right? James Cook, largest spread of 14-point spread going up against the Pats. So you assume that they're going to be able to run the ball a decent amount. James Cook's averaging a touchdown a game so far this season. So I think you just kind of have to go ahead and get him in. Hubbard back-to-back games with over 95% of the snaps. Going over to wide receiver, I think you have to jam in A.J. Brown and Devontae Adams. Tight end, we're going to go Kincaid over Noah Gray. So really what it comes down to is, do you start Terry McLaurin or Chuba Hubbard down there in that flex spot? And for me, I have Hubbard ranked ahead of Terry now with no more Brooks, no more Miles Sanders. Really, you have Hubbard seeing not 100%, but 97% of the snaps in Carolina. He is one of the very few true 3-down bell cows at this point. So I think you go ahead and you take Hubbard. Now, let's move this over to our next question. Coming out from Kath Rex is struggling with who to start for wide receiver 2. Running back, we know we're going to go Gibbs, James Cook relatively easily. Wide receiver, we're going to go Chase and Jennings. Yeah, Jennings has cemented himself very easily as the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco. 9 targets this past week. He's just absolutely dominated the target volume since you've had no Ayuk. We're going to go with Jonnu over Laporta. Trust me, I'm praying to God Laporta outscores him. It just ain't happening. And then down here in the flex, Aiden O'Connell being good to go does make Jacoby Myers a little bit more interesting. I have Myers ranked ahead of DJ Moore, despite DJ Moore being in a prime matchup against the Lions. Just more concentrated target share that you're going to have with the Raiders offense. And half PBR format, honestly, I think we just go ahead and you take Jacoby Myers down here in the flex spot, primarily because you have O'Connell good to go. And Myers has been a very consistent option with 10+ targets. Now, 55th Street Crews coming through. Running back, we're looking at Pacheco, Brian Robinson, Pollard. Pollard has been banged up. I think Pacheco's been playing fewer than 40% of the snaps in KC. I think we probably go ahead and we take Brian Robinson and just take the safe role that we know we're going to have, even if it's a very tough matchup. Wide receiver, I'm going to go Devonta Smith over Keenan. And then down here in the flex, this is where things get a little bit difficult between Pacheco, Pollard, and Keenan Allen. I mean, if you go over and look at what we have with the projections on Underdog at the moment, Keenan Allen's scored a bunch of touchdowns over the past month. Keenan Allen's higher, lower, 53.5 receiving yards. And again, it is a relatively decent matchup here. You have Tony Pollard, higher, lower, 56.5 rushing yards, but you're obviously going to get some receiving sprinkled in as well. I think Pollard's more likely to get the touchdown than what you're going to expect with Keenan. And Pacheco is currently higher, lower, 62.5 total yards, more likely to get the touchdown than Pollard, but probably, less of a receiving threat. So I think, honestly, these options are very, very similar. What's the spread on the Titans game again? Should be, I think it's 3.5 against Indy. I have Pollard ranked as the best option, and if Pollard's not good to go, I think you can pivot over to Keenan. But I think Pollard will be fine. Now, Ginger Baby said, if Pollard is out, do we put Spears in the flex? I want the championship. 100%. If Pollard's out, Spears is going to be a must-start play because you're going to get 20-plus opportunities, including all the receiving work. Here for the wide receiver slots, easy because we have no Diggs and no Godwin, of course. You just go ahead and you play Terry McLaurin in a tough matchup. And then you're going to go ahead and I would play Calvin Ridley as well. Darnell Mooney in a game environment in which you probably see a bunch of rushing attempts in Atlanta. And the target share is going to be spread out even more with the receivers in KC now that Hollywood's back in. And then down here in the flex, I think you go with Kenneth Walker. And yeah, but sure, if you had no Pollard, you could pivot over to Tajay Spears because Spears would have a larger workload than Walker at that point from a market share perspective. And also Spears would definitely have more receiving work. Now, Gunna Boy coming through says, can't wait for Kamara. Spears looks like the best option. Going against the Lions stack this week. Any other options out there? Hook 'em horns. Hook 'em horns, my friend. I really appreciate the support. Let me hook you up with a free start set question. And here, running back, you're not going to have Kamara. And I know you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire as like the last minute ditch play. In my mind, if Pollard plays, Spears is not your best option here. I think if Pollard plays, Tracy's probably your best play. Now, Pollard misses, pivot over to Spears. Going down to tight end, you're playing Strange over Pitts. I would do the same. And you're playing Thielen down in the flex. I'd do the same there as well. But, yeah, again, with Spears, do they even have projections out for him? I know he got there based off him having just an absolute massive role. Massive plays as a receiver against the worst defense in the league last week. But still. And let me look at this. What are the projections with Najee? Najee, higher lower 9.9 fantasy points. Kind of going off the rails just for my own team real quick. Ramondre, higher lower 9.9. They project out the exact same. I wish Danny, if you're still in the chat, are you going with Najee or Ramondre this week? But going back to this, I'm not excited to play Najee Harris. I completely understand where you're coming from on that front. Bad matchup, bad game environment, and they took a bunch of the work away from him this past week. Yeah, but Tracy projects higher than Najee Harris does, which is what I figured. And I have Tracy ranked higher than Najee as well. So I think Tracy is going to be your play here at running back. However, if Pollard's ruled out, then you can pivot over to Spears. But yeah, you're not going to have Kamara in this game. Like if anybody is sitting here with hopes for Kamara, don't hold your breath for sure. Now, Text Radar coming through says Ingram is Britton Strange, Jason, Hill, Rico, and then Rico or JM. Let's figure this out. Quarterback, I would go Purdy over Love to a little more rushing upside in game environment, which I think you have more pass attempts. Tight ends, I would still go Kelsey over Strange relatively easily. If you have to start two tight ends, I don't know if David Njoku is going to be good to go or not. If Njoku plays, it's a great matchup against Cincinnati, but he's banged up and you have no Winston. So I think you probably plan on going Strange. Wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, and between is going to be a play that you have to go with. And then I think you go Dowdle over JSN at this point if the weather's not looking great in Seattle, where Dowdle's just a very safe play where you do have the true 3-down workload. Now, Nickel Pickle says, number 1 seed, first year, hell yes. Can't decide on the lineup this week. Wide receiver, you have the safe target share with Neighbors. You have the great offense with Higgins. You have Tyreek with no Waddle. You have to play Tyreek, of course. Full PPR formats, honestly, for that reason, I think you maybe just play it safe with the wide receivers going with Higgins as well as Neighbors. You have the interesting running back with Kenneth Walker, but again, with Charbonnet ruled as team captain, I think if you have just the absolute stud wide receivers that you can very easily pencil out, see 8+ targets in a full PPR format with Neighbors and Higgins, I think you just kind of have to go with them. Now, our cake says, made some waiver wire moves, have some options for the semis. So yeah, we can play Ford. I would play Ford over Spears, Tracy, and Taylor. Now, of course, if you end up, I don't know. If you end up having no Pollard, you definitely pivot over to Tajee Spears from Jerome Ford. But Ford has the best matchup you can ask for in the NFL. It's going to be against the worst defense. I'm going to go Tucker Kraft over Strange, probably myself. I think kind of go back and forth on that front. I think really the important thing is to figure out who we're going to go with the flex. And honestly, Tracy Taylor's tough. Taylor's going to be the much better offense. Tracy's going to have the safer volume. I think I'd probably go Taylor and say that we have more upside for a touchdown, which in that PPR format, of course, is very important. Now, Austin Pinkerton coming through. We need a flex play between Jonnu, Thielen, and Keenan. Keenan has a phenomenal matchup, of course, going up against a banged up Lions defense. And this is a spot where sportsbooks are actually giving a considerable amount of credit to the Chicago Bears offense. But for me, I probably end up going with the wide receiver 1 in his own offense with Adam Thielen. You actually have the point projections being very similar in Chicago and Carolina this week. And while Jalen Coker does actually get there this past week, you still have Adam Thielen as the number 1 target earner. So I would go ahead, I'd play Adam Thielen, but honestly, the other 2 players are relatively close. Doug says, even up this week, pulled the upset last week, hashtag for the championship. Let's go, my guy. Rico Dowdle, zero hesitation in terms of the workload you have in a high-scoring game environment. You for sure play Dowdle. And then down there at tight end, I'm not super excited about Strange. I know last week he absolutely dominated. But again, I do still expect it to be a bad offense, and I don't think Strange is a special player. But in comparison to him with Pat Frymuth, I mean, you actually do have sportsbooks saying that the Jags should be a better offense than the Steelers this week in total points scored. And obviously, the Jags have nobody to throw the ball to outside of Strange and Thomas, so we're going to go Strange. Now, Hilstero coming through. Wide receiver, I think you have to play London and Lamb. I know a lot of people want to go with Brian Thomas. We're going to get him into the flex. Tight end, I go Andrews over Kraft, and then going down to the flex spots, I think you just very easily play Terry McLaurin and Brian Thomas. I think maybe the only hesitation that somebody would have here, of course, is Terry McLaurin. Last time he played Philly, did not crack 3 fantasy points, and it is a really tough matchup. Can't really deny it, but I mean, ultimately, I still think that this is somebody that you have to play over Devonta Smith, where if you're looking at Smith, you just don't have the same type of consistency that we've seen from McLaurin all season. Now, Bezos says, we have 11 teams. I'm down 7 points from week 15. Start, sit, 2-point Terry or Jawan. Devonta Smith is in the flex. So I am starting Smith with my own team this week. Like, I really hope Smith is the highest scoring guy out of these 3 options. But to be honest with you, I can't say that with any type of confidence or any type of certainty. I actually have both Terry McLaurin and Jawan Jennings ranked higher than Devonta Smith. Again, the Eagles have been a rush first offense so far this season, while at the same time, you are in a spot in which we are going to assume that A.J. Brown does dominate the target volume here in Philadelphia most weeks. Terry and Jennings have cemented themselves as the alpha wide receiver ones in their respective offenses. I understand it's a very tough matchup for Terry, but how I would rank these guys this week is I would go Terry 1, Jennings 2, Smith 3. We can see what the underdog projections are on this. Terry, they have higher lower 16.5 receiving yards. Jennings, higher lower 63.5. So they have Jennings 1, Terry 2. But then Smith is much lower in the projections, not only with yardage, but also with touchdown probability. So yeah, I definitely think you play both these guys over Devonta Smith. But if I had to choose just between the two of them, for me, I go Terry McLaurin, even though it's a really tough matchup. Isaiah says, in a blender with injuries, carry me to the ship, please. All right, let's figure this out, my friend. I think you're in an interesting spot to play Jerome Ford here. With Ford, you have the guaranteed receiving usage. You're going up against the worst defense in the league that just allowed Spears to go nuclear. Really, the main consideration that you would have is instead of Ford to go with Tracy, Taylor, Jameson. I can't be confident with the workload that you're going to have with Taylor. Tracy's probably not going to have the same receiving usage that Ford does, and he doesn't have as good of a matchup. And I think with Jameson, you have a wider range of outcomes. So for me, if this was my team, my friend, I would go with Jerome Ford in a really good matchup. Now, S. Fielder says, need a running back 2 in a flex. We also have Patrick Taylor. A running back 2, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Ramondre Stevenson over these other options. Buffalo's allowed a ton of points to opposing running backs so far this season, but with that being said, of course, it's a 14-point spread, so I'm not super excited about it. And down here in the flex, I would go with Patrick Taylor over Miller, over Warren, over Madison. Patrick Taylor should be in the best offense out of that group. And Miller's not going to catch the ball. So, yeah, for me, I'm going to go Patrick Taylor. So I'm going to leave this empty here for you, my friend. Now, Stinky Nerd says, got to outscore the opponent by 12 or I'm out. So we're going to go Daniels. I know it's a tough matchup against Philly, but we have seen Daniels have a much higher ceiling than Kyler so far this season. And also, you're probably going to see Daniels with more dropbacks than Kyler, knowing that the Cardinals are pretty heavily favored in their game, where you can assume that they're going to run the ball a ton. I'm going down to the flex. If we were to get anybody into this lineup, it probably would be like maybe Pollard, but there's no way in hell I'm starting Pollard over Mixon, Henry, or London. So yeah, I think you could go with the lineup like this. It is an awkward spot, though, with both of your running backs having really tough matchups with Mixon and Henry. Now, so Rom Kabither says, yes, Mason, somehow in this demise, good luck to you. We got this. Defense, we're going to go Minnesota or Atlanta. Cheers, mate. Cheers, my friend. I really do appreciate you. So Minnesota, clearly a much better defensive unit. Atlanta, clearly a much better matchup. I have them ranked back-to-back in my rankings this week. If the weather looks like it's going to be nasty in the Minnesota-Seattle game, I think you go ahead and I think you play the Minnesota defense. However, if the weather looks like it's going to be okay, then in that instance, I think you're going to go with the Atlanta defense. But they are ranked back-to-back for me. And of course, I'm really rooting for you, my guy. I appreciate you sticking with us for so long now. And wide receiver, I think you have to play Addison and Terry despite the tough matchup, just by far and away the most consistent options we've had. I honestly would go Kincaid over Ferguson. Both offenses aren't really concentrated outside of maybe CeeDee Lamb. A bunch of players do touch the ball, but you're just going to have significantly more points scored, of course, in Buffalo than what you're going to expect in Dallas. Going over to what we have with the flex, I think you just simply take Rico Dowdle. I mean, with Dowdle, you have the very safe 3-down workload where you don't necessarily have to concern yourself with maybe, I don't know, a Marvin Harrison being an extremely boom bust option, where you can maybe make an argument that Harrison has a similar ceiling or maybe even a higher ceiling in a full PPR format. But we can also safely say that Harrison has a much lower floor as well. But K. Brewster coming through. We need a flex between Miller, Spears, McMillan, Dobbs. I think this is the one instance in which I can tell somebody to play Kendre Miller, Condre Miller, tomato. Again, a running back, TCU did not really catch the ball. A running back in the NFL's never really caught the ball. The Saints project to be the lowest scoring offense in the league this week. But you have no Olave, you have no Carr, you have no Taysom, you have no Shaheed. So every touch presumably should be through Miller. The reason I'm not super excited about him, though, is, again, I think these running backs that won't catch the ball are very much touchdown or bust. And I don't necessarily know how excited we can be about touchdowns specifically in New Orleans. But I mean, in comparison to Spears, if Pollard's good to go, you just have no idea what the workload's going to end up looking like for Spears. Now, Eli Baller says, need help at wide receiver 2 in the flex. Appreciate you, my friend. Here, wide receiver 2, I think we're going to go ahead and probably take Devonta Smith over DK Metcalf. I'm playing DK and Smith this week with my own team. Really hope both go nuclear. But Metcalf, you have a good matchup against Minnesota. They do allow a ton of points to opposing wide receivers, but still at the same time, you just have not had any type of consistency since he's returned from his injury. And then down in the flex, I'm going to go with Breece Hall. Now, not nearly as easy as it would have been early in the year, of course, with Breece playing fewer than 50% of the snaps this past week, but still definitely somebody that you can go ahead and start. Now, Noah Steph says, who do we start at running back? So our other option to pivot to would be Amir Abdullah or Kareem Hunt. And out of those options, you definitely go with Bucky Irving and Miller, not even remotely close. Down in the flex, I guess maybe the best option you could get in would be Jaden Reed. That's currently on the bench. But yeah, no, I think you leave this lineup as is. For the love of God, do not be playing Amir Abdullah. I know Abdullah kind of got there this past week, but still, you do have Alexander Madison projecting to see the majority of the work here. Abdullah is just kind of going to be that receiving back. Now, Bajor says, no worries, but never got any questions from my team review. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what you're asking. I'll hook you up with a free start sit question, my friend. So you should have a free start sit voucher. I don't know if that's what you're asking for, though, but let me hook you up with this start sit at least. We're going to go Jonathan Taylor here. Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall. Again, with Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy's been so much better than both JT and Breece Hall so far over the past really 6 weeks. But now that you actually have some of these healthier pieces in Cleveland coming back in, while at the same time, you have no Jameis Winston, I think you assume that the passing volume is going to fall dramatically and the market share numbers may come down just a bit for Jeudy at the same time. So I'd rather just take the feature down backs. Now, Lil Faith coming through says, and real quick, Lil Faith, really appreciate you. Let me hook you up with a free start sit question. Says, should we start Addison or Patrick at the flex? Also, should we try to pick up a free agent tight ends? Okay, let's see. What are the projections with Pitts this week? Higher, lower, 25.5 receiving yards. Will Underdog let you see? No, you can't sort by position. What are some free agent? Obviously, we'd go Strange over Pitts. Let's just go Noah Gray, lower projections, and Kyle Pitts. There's no worlds in which I'm starting Noah Gray. Maybe Dalton Schultz is out there for you. Dalton Schultz, higher, lower, 34.5 receiving yards. Schultz has better projections. How is Kincaid so low with the projections here? If you can pick up Dalton Schultz, I would. Obviously, Miami. John, who's going to be rostered already. Same thing with Kittle. What about Minnesota? Hawkinson will already be rostered. What's the projection with Noah Fant? Noah Fant, slightly worse than Kyle Pitts with projections this week. Bauer's already rostered. Strange, presumably already rostered. If Strange is out there, go pick him up. Cade Otton's even going to be out. I mean, maybe Ferguson was dropped in your league. I think you can go Ferg over Pitts if you want. What's the projection with Jawan versus Pitts? Jawan, they don't have any yardage marks out. I mean, obviously, there's no part of me in which I want to start Kyle Pitts. There's maybe a small possibility that Michael Penix comes through and he likes Pitts a little bit more than Cousins did, but Pitts has disappointed with a bunch of different quarterbacks at this point. And then for me, full PPR format, I'll go with the known quantity of Jordan Addison. Again, it's very difficult to come through and say we know for a fact that Patrick Taylor is going to be used in the same way that CMC, in the same way that Jordan Mason, in the same way that Isaac Rindo all were. If you told me that he was going to be a feature back to that extent, I would go ahead and take Patrick Taylor. I just think it's far from a guarantee, to be honest. Now, GX Ghost coming through. Tight end, we're looking at Njoku versus Strange. For me, lowered passing volume in Cleveland, more target competition, and Njoku is banged up. I don't really want to tell anybody to play David Njoku this week. The bonus that you have with Njoku is, one, obviously he's a much better player than Britton Strange. And two, at the same time, it is a really good matchup against Cincy. Now, Coe Bryant coming through. Running back, we're looking at Walker versus Spears. Taylor, I guess. You definitely go with Kenneth Walker here. Tight end, I would go Strange over Hunter Henry. And then down in the flex, you play Tyreek Hill. Please make sure you're playing Tyreek over these, running backs in the flex. I know Tyreek gave you the dud this past week. I know he's not been close to being that top 3 option at wide receiver. But still, you have had the spikes where you did get the 28-point bomb 2 weeks ago, 20-point performance 3 weeks ago, and you also have no Waddle in this offense this week. Teresa, always happy to see. And of course, let me just make sure you have as many free start set questions as you could possibly need. And same thing with trade questions. It says 2 flex spots, Shakir, Taylor, Jonnu, Worthy, Dobbs. We got to pick 2. Half PPR semifinal game. Taylor, 100% you have to play. Like, Taylor's not even remotely close here. Taylor's been disappointing, but again, when you're looking at a running back that's favored, that's going to get every single touch in his backfield, I think that is just an absolute no-brainer start. Jonnu's been better than Shakir, but obviously I always have a very hard time to ever go through and tell anybody to get a player a tight end into their flex. You have Shakir higher, lower 55.5 receiving yards. You have Jonnu higher, lower 49.5. Plus at the same time, this is a half PPR format where we are really chasing touchdowns in that half PPR format. And I think just Shakir is going to be in a significantly better offense. So for me, I think we're going to go ahead. We're going to take Shakir Taylor. I don't think there's any way you can consider Worthy Dobbs. And if you wanted to pivot, I think the pivot would probably end up being from Shakir over to Jonnu Smith. But for me, I wouldn't go in that direction. I would just play it safe and take Shakir. But I always appreciate you should have free starts of questions and trade questions ever. Whenever you want. Drake May Lover coming through. Quarterback, we're looking at Baker versus Daniels. 4-point passing touchdown format. Give me Daniels. Baker's been incredible. And the Bucs offense also projects to be the higher scoring offense between the two. But Daniels, you get more rushing upside. They're probably going to be forced to throw the ball a bunch as well. Wide receiver, I think just simply you have to play Tyreek Hill no matter what here with no Waddle. And this is an insane team where we actually have to consider possibly benching Derrick Henry here in the flex spot because you do have the tough matchup. I wouldn't do it. I would still play Henry. And I'd end up benching Higgins and JSN instead. Obviously, Henry does have a tough matchup, but you do have them favored by, I want to say, about 5 points in Baltimore. So they should be able to run the ball, which is exciting, of course. Now, coming through Scottus. Quarterback, let's see if there's anything we had changed. If you want to get anybody in, it would be Pacheco at running back, Flowers at receiver. I would possibly consider playing Flowers over DJ Moore myself. DJ Moore has a really good game environment. I have them ranked back-to-back, however. If you look at my rankings this week, I have Flowers, DJ Moore ranked back-to-back. I'm not going to tell anybody to change their starting lineup when it's that close, so I think you just leave it as is. Now, 1K11 coming through. Tight ends, we're looking at McBride versus Jonnu. Down in the flex, I think you just simply are probably going to end up having to play Devonta Smith in a full PPR format. And then for the other call, it's going to be between Ramadre, Pacheco, Tracy, and Rachaad White. Pacheco in a running back by committee, similar to White. Stevenson should have the majority of the work, but in an absolute garbage offense. I probably end up going with Pacheco here in the second flex spot. Not super excited about it, though. Now, Creason says Rachaad White or Condre Miller in a full PPR format. Full PPR league, give me White. White's going to be in a significantly better offense, and White's also going to have a larger role as a receiver. Now, Ray does says, need your help with the championship. Who are we going to sit? You have to play Achane. Ford Pacheco is a little bit tough. Pacheco's the better player. Pacheco's in the better offense. Ford has a safer workload, while at the same time, Ford does have the better matchup against Cincy. I actually may end up going Ford. And then down here, wide receiver, I think you play Jacoby Myers. And then down in the flex, I think you take Pacheco. Definitely don't play Kincaid in the flex, whatever you do. I have Kincaid on my team. I'm benching him this week, but yeah, there's no world in which I'm considering Kincaid in the flex. Okay. Now, CJ coming through. Tight end, we got Kelsey versus Jonnu. I think at this point, even with Mahomes good to go, you kind of got to throw in the towel and take Jonnu Smith, who's just been significantly better than Kelsey for pretty much all season now. I mean, the only thing is, I will say with Kelsey, you have the benefit of him getting positive touchdown regression in his future where the target volumes look great. He's just not scoring. Nate says, good luck, everyone. Herbert had me starting great. Great call on Herbert. I thought he was a bench. I would not have started Herbert if I had him in that matchup with those projections. But if you played him, good call. And then down here, wide receiver, I think simply you do have to go ahead and you have to take Malik Neighbors, especially if you are already in a good spot because we have Herbert in the lineup. And hell, I mean, you have Jacobs down in the flex. Your team's so strong. So Malik Neighbors, probably cap ceiling just simply because you're not in a spot where there are going to be a ton of touchdowns scored in New York, but you have a safe target floor. Now, Andre says, feel good about everyone else, Jerome or Rachaad White. Let's see if we change anything throughout the rest of this lineup. No, we leave the rest of the lineup as is. Ford versus White will be tough. Again, obviously, White has had a decent little role here in a committee with Bucky. I would go Jerome Ford, though. Again, I know we talked about this in the waiver wire video, but Ford, I think, is by far and away the best, scrap heap waiver wire pick that you can get. Like, I'd way rather play him over Miller. Because with Ford, you're going to have receiving usage and you're going up against the worst defense in the league. So I don't love the fact that you have no Winston, of course, but I still think you can go Ford. Vex Dots says, going against a stacked team, he started Bo Nix. So tight end, I go Jonnu Smith over Laporta, and I send up a secret little prayer that Laporta outscores him. I really need Laporta for myself. And then you have to play Tyreek Hill. I know Tyreek Hill gave you the dud this past week. But again, you got 28 points 2 weeks back. You have no Waddle. The Dolphins project to be higher scoring offense this week than they did last against Houston. So I think you're going to be rolling with the combo of the Dolphins with Jonnu as well as Tyreek Hill. I combined Tyreek Hill and Tyreek here. So Tyreek Hill here. Now, Jason, for the flex, we have Najee. I don't know exactly what you're asking. I'm going to hook you up with a free start set question because I think maybe you submitted this wrong. So just submit whatever you're wanting correctly. And yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Najee, I'd rather avoid him if we can. Like, I'm benching Najee with my own team this week. Tony Soprano coming through. Running back, for me, I think I would look at Swift, White, Tracy, all in a very similar range. I'd probably go Swift. You have decent projections for this Bears offense against Detroit. Going down to the flex, I would rather play the running backs probably over. I mean, I would probably go Rachaad White over Marvin Harrison at this point. White, really good game environment, safe floor, super high scoring offense. And Harrison, I mean, it's just hard to view him when he's been so inconsistent. Now, Tony coming through with another one here. Wide receiver, I would go Pittman over Jalen McMillan myself. I know McMillan's gotten there over the past 2 weeks in the face of, I mean, some of the best offensive numbers you're going to see from Tampa. And then down in the flex, it's really going to be between Jerome Ford and Brian Robinson for me. I have them ranked back to back. We can go ahead and we can pull them up on Underdog with what the projections are looking like there. Ford higher lower 75.5 total yards. Brian Robinson is higher lower 67.5 total yards. Brian Robinson's more likely to see the touchdown. Jerome Ford's going to be looking at more receiving usage. So full PPR format, I may go with Ford. Bibb says, I need massive upside this week because I'm going against the first team in my league. Chig, I think, will go off. Oh. You do you, my guy, but I would not be excited about it. Right now, he's higher lower 27.5 receiving yards with a 2.41x multiplier to score a touchdown. So, not super excited on that front. If we're looking at options to get into the lineup, Marvin Harrison versus Evans, Lamb, Metcalf, can't play Harrison. Miller versus Ford, Aaron Jones, Metcalf, can't play Miller. Obviously, we play Allen. So I think we leave this as is. I'm not super excited about Chig, though, to be honest with you. Now, Hublos is struggling with my lineup, making a play for the championship round. Quarterback, I'm going to go Kyler over Mahomes. Offense should be much higher scoring, while at the same time, you do have the rushing upside with Kyler, but Kyler hasn't been great. A running back, I go Swift and Ford. Ford, more receiving usage than Najee. Offensive projections are actually kind of similar this week. Wide receiver, we're going to go A.J. Brown, and then down there in the flex, we're going to go Brian Thomas, with him being one of the last guys standing in Jacksonville. But really appreciate you and really rooting for you this week, my friend. Now, Mitten coming through says, need help with the flex spots. Here, I think the easy play is going to be Zay Flowers. You jam in Flowers kind of regardless. And then in the second spot, it does get a little bit tougher. If Tajee Spears is the starter with no Tony Pollard this week, Spears is a very easy play here. But if Pollard does play, I would probably go with DeAndre Hopkins. And I do think that Pollard's probably going to play. Now, JJ says start one, Dobbs or Watson. And then we also get a 6-point touchdown over 40 yards. If we're looking at Romeo Dobbs versus Christian Watson, I don't necessarily think that this is going to be a high volume passing attack kind of regardless here. If you're looking at the projections this week, you have Romeo Dobbs higher lower 39.5 total yards. You have Christian Watson higher lower 46.5, but very similar projections. My thing is, if you're making it seem like we get big play bonuses here, which is what I'm assuming you're saying, I think we probably end up going with Christian Watson. Watson's definitely the big play option in comparison to Romeo Dobbs. So I think you go Watson, but again, I think you're kind of flipping a coin there. Paul says, how many best ball semis are you in? I am in 16. I have 16 best ball sweat still alive, I believe. I can just go ahead and pull this up for y'all. This is how my Underdog season's looking right now. I have 16. I have 2 in the Mastiff, 3 in the Big Dog, 2 in the Chow Chow, 3 in Best Ball Mania, 1 in the Pitbull. I really didn't do any puppy drafts this year. That was a big difference than what I did in years past. But we still have 2 in the Fast Puppy. I did like the Fast Puppy because that's when they shortened the timer. But yeah, our Underdog teams are absolutely freaking killing it this year. And then also we advanced 41 sprint teams. And I don't think I've been saying that I advanced more sprint teams than anybody else on Underdog. And I haven't seen anybody correct me until now. So I think we've advanced more sprint teams than anybody else. And we still have 16 teams live for an active sweat in the, Alex coming through flexing on us with 18 drafts moving forward. That's awesome, my guy. But anyway, Jay Rude says waivers are dry semifinals, albeit screwed at running back. Let's see. I think you have to go ahead. You have to take Miller. Absolutely hate it. Again, touchdown or bust running back in a garbage offense. But what other option do you have? I'm not playing Craig Reynolds. And then we're going to go Roma Dunze down here in the flex, and we are going to send up a prayer that this turns into a shootout against the banged up Lions defense. Now, Sunrise says, need help picking who to start. Well, I know we start Brees here, and then honestly, I think we go with Ramadre with the guaranteed workload. Buffalo's allowed a ton of points to opposing running backs, but 14-point spread, so not super confident with it. Going down to tight ends, I would just play Andrews. Njoku banged up, lowered volume with the passing offense, and plus you actually have more targets getting dispersed with the receivers being healthier. Down in the 2 flex spots, I think you go with Harrison and just take the natural volatility, and Adam Thielen as well. Less excited about Hopkins now that we have Hollywood back in dispersing the targets in KC, especially with the banged up Mahomes. Robin Biggs is struggling with Burrow or Lamar in my flexes. We're going to go Lamar over Burrow. Even if it's a tough matchup, you actually do have a really nice implied team total, like 25.5 points for Baltimore this week. And then going down to the flex, we have no Kamara. We have no CMC. We can consider Patrick Taylor. We can consider Khalil Shakir. Full PBR format, I think you just play it safe with Khalil Shakir. Again, Underdog has like Patrick Taylor, higher, lower, 34.5 rushing yards. It's very difficult for me to sit here and for me to be super excited about I don't know. Say that we can be certain that Taylor has the same workload as Garindo. Be certain that Taylor has the same workload as Jordan Mason. And dear God, it feels like so long ago we had Jordan Mason as a starter here. Like the Niners have started 4 different viable fantasy RBs at this point this season. Now Scotty coming through. Wide receiver, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take Higgins and Adams. Super concentrated offense in Cincy. That does have the best passing volume in the league. Adams, super concentrated offense with the Jets as well. And Kupp, 2 of the last 3 weeks that we've had have been absolute duds. Now, Big Daddy Lion says, projected 15 points less than my opponent, half PPR format. Don't know who our tight end options are. For the flex between Addison, Ramadre, Smith, I think if we're chasing ceiling, you probably have a higher ceiling with the receivers. To be honest, I would probably go with Devonta Smith and hope that it's a high-scoring game environment against the Commanders. You've only had 1 game with double-digit targets since week 3. So can I sit here and can I be like super confident with this play? No, I mean, Ramadre maybe gives you just higher floor based off raw volume alone. But realistically, against the Bills, I don't know what the ceiling looks like for Ramadre Stevenson, where I'm pretty confident that we could see Smith come through. And I mean, if he can just replicate the 12 targets he had last week, he's going to absolutely crush. But Addison is there as well. But I know some people are worried about the weather. Uncle Dud says, pick wide receiver 2 in a flex. Patrick Taylor is also an option. Wide receiver 2, we're going to go with Brian Thomas. And then I'm going to go with Jonathan Taylor over Kupp and Patrick Taylor. Again, JT is a running back that's seeing 100% of the opportunities in his own backfield, while at the same time, you're in a situation in which you have the Colts favored in this game against Tennessee. Hogan, always happy to see you. And I know we need to get the underdog draft going. Let me try to run through all these questions. I don't think we have too many in the queue, and we'll try to get the underdog draft going after this. But I have Taylor also. Olave is playing. Is Olave playing? I know he was practicing. Colts or Lions DST. I'd probably go. I mean, if you're looking at the Colts defense, lower implied team total against the Tennessee Titans this week, I'd probably go Colts DST. If the Lions were fully healthy, it'd easily be the Lions. You for sure go Aaron Jones here at running back. Wide receiver, we're going to go with Tyreek, and then we're going to throw Neighbors down in the flex. Tight end, I think we go Kraft. And then in the other flex spot, if Olave plays, you go Olave in a full PPR format. So then you plan on Olave, and if he doesn't, you go with Miller. Yeah, I was not expecting Olave to play this week. Now, Fillmore Maker coming through. Tight end, I'm going to go Strange over Njoku. Again, Njoku banged up. Lower passing volume with no Winston. And then down here in that second flex spot, I'm just going to take Pacheco. We have no Pickens. So really our options are like Pacheco versus Amari and Pittman. And of course, the Pacheco workload's not consistent, but Can we be super confident about the volume with the other guys? Daniel says, Rip Montgomery, Rip Pickens. We need some help with the flex. Yeah, this is a brutal spot. I think the ceiling play is going to be Rome Odunze, hoping that you just get the long receiving touchdown in a game environment in which the Bears are going to be forced to throw the ball a bunch. But the safe play is taking Miller and just getting the guaranteed touches. But again, not super excited about Miller. Touchdown or bust running back with horrible offense. Here for a Hogan, I think at this point you just simply have to play Baker based off the consistency that we have seen. Looking over at running back 2 between Walker, Bucky, Tracy, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Kenneth Walker. Down in the flex, we have those same running backs, but we also have, no, A.J. Brown, Malik Neighbors are there. So we're actually going to go ahead. We're going to take Bucky Irving in that flex spot over Devonta Smith, over Chris Olave, over Tank Dell, over Tyrone Tracy. But yeah, I mean, at this point, you do have also with the projections this week, the Bucs projected yet again to be one of the higher scoring offenses in the league. Okay, so these are all the questions that we have queued up on the site right now. So we should be able to get through these, and then it shouldn't take us too long. We can probably get to some questions in the live chat and draft an underdog team at the same time. Hogan says, sitting Mixon for Ford, is this crazy? Play him in the other league. Okay. This is 100% crazy. Do not do this. I understand bad matchup and bad offensive projection going up against KC here, but for the love of God, you play Mixon. I wouldn't even play Ford at all. I'd play Bucky. Down here in the flex, I guess you could go Ford and Wilson if you really wanted Ford. And then your other option to pivot to would be Judy instead of Ford. If you really wanted to go with Jerome Ford, I think you go ahead and you take Ford over Judy, but you don't take Ford over Mixon. Now, Sam Joe Meyer says, Walker, Taylor, Rashad White. Sorry, it's right. No, I mean, it's fine. If these were the options we're looking at, I would go James Conner over all of them. But Kenneth Walker, Patrick Taylor, Rashad White, I will go ahead and I will take Kenneth Walker. Whereas if you're looking at Walker, this is a running back where super simple. He got the practice in full on Thursday. He is entirely removed off the injury report. So the base assumption is that he is good to go. Of course, you can have the hesitation that Charbonnet was listed as a team captain. So maybe Charbonnet's workload is going to be consistent. But looking at this for God to win, I'm going to assume that you need 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a flex. Quarterback, we go Hurts. Running back, Derrick Henry, Achane. Wide receiver, Chase, A.J. Brown. Tight end, we're going to go Jonnu. And then down there in the flex between Garrett Wilson and Bucky Irving, it is close, full PPR format. Adams has really dominated targets, but it's still a stupid concentrated offense where you really only have 2 players touching the ball. So I would go Garrett Wilson in the flex. Now, Sam Fantasy Pro coming through. We need a flex between Charbonnet, Bigsby, Christian Watson, and Hollywood. I would go Charbonnet here with him being the team captain, hoping that maybe you just get some simple receiving usage and maybe you get lucky with the touchdown, but you're kind of looking at touchdown or bust players regardless. Now, a Bork coming through. Looking at what we need for the flex, we have Brian Robinson, Pacheco, Rashad White, and then I'm not really considering anybody else here, to be completely honest with you. I think I probably end up going with Brian Robinson. It's a tough matchup going up against Philly, but at least you have him as the lead back and you have him effectively with the guaranteed workload, especially with no Eckler. You are going to get a slightly increased, a slightly increased target share for him out of this backfield. Now, Jason coming out, wide receiver, we're looking at Tyreek, Addison, Hopkins, Jennings. I think I'd go Tyreek and Jennings. Tight end, Jonnu over Laporta, but I hope I'm wrong. Running back, Rico Dowdle. And then we're going to go Addison with the other flex spot. Again, Addison, still kind of a touchdown or bust player, but you have seen more target volume as of late. Here for the super flex spot for Jason, I'm going to go with Purdy over Caleb. If you do need a third running back here, which this looks like crazy league format, we're going to go ahead. I would probably take Pacheco, Rashad White, both running back by committees. But Pacheco, you can see at least leading the backfields. Going over to tight end, if we need to start 2 tight ends, I guess you go Pitts and Kmet if these are the guys left over. You could have started Stone Smart previously. And then we're going to go with Ramondre Stevenson as well as Rashad White down here in the 2 flex spots. And yeah, I think honestly, looking at the projections of Patrick Taylor, I'm definitely getting scared off of Taylor. Now, Jay Rude says Hunt, Singletary, Miller, or Abdullah. Here, I would go with Miller. I would just take the guaranteed volume, even if it's a bad offense and even if he doesn't have the receiving usage. Okay, let me see if we have any more questions. I think that should be it. I'll refresh this in about 5 questions to see if any more came in on flockfantasy.com. But real quick, Hogan, if you're in the chat and you were still wanting to do that underdog draft, shoot me a message. And let me know. Shoot me a message. I see you on Discord. Let me copy and let me know if you're wanting. I still have that invite link. I don't know if that invite link is still active, but I just found it. I'm just going to copy and paste this in and see what happens. And then also, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, everybody. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to need a new draft, Austin. I'm going to need a new one. Alex says, good luck, boys and girls. Let's go SMU. Yeah, Austin, you're going to have to send me a new link. I'm sorry, that one's not working. But let me know, what are y'all going to be watching today? Like, what's the slate of games we're looking at? Exactly. We have the Texans, Chiefs kicking off in about 15. Then we have the Steelers, Ravens. The issue is these are damn good games. Whereas you go over and you look at what we have here for today. You have SMU, Penn State right now. Clemson, Texas, 3 p.m. And Tennessee, Ohio State, 7. This is going to be an insane day of football. Chris needs Nico to go off. Let's see. Jackson says Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas in a full PPR format. I'll go with Brian Thomas. You actually have much better projections with the Jags offense than you do with the Giants. Aaron says, do we expect Njoku to play? I simply don't know. I've been answering people asking Njoku questions. So usually go with the other guy, because even if Njoku does play, I don't know how excited you're going to be about it. Okay. I just got the invite from Hogan. So I don't remember what the exact bet is on it. All I know is we owe him a free year-long subscription to flockfantasy.com if he beats us in this underdog draft. And I don't know what you have to do if you lose, my guy, but whatever it is, I've taken way too long to get this going for you. So we will. How about this? Simple. I win. You buy a year-long subscription to the site. You win. I give you one for free. All right, let's freaking go. But yeah, J.J. Daniels definitely still a must-start option. Absolutely zero hesitation here with that. Austin says, I'll send you a $100 dono if you win. Just buy a year-long subscription to the site with code FLOCK, my friend. How about that? Buy a year-long sub to the site with code FLOCK. And if I win, if you win, I'll give you a free one. Stupid simple. So I know nothing about, so these are just for the games. What games are these? Is this just the Green Bay, New Orleans, Dallas, Tampa? Are these the only, is this the only slate we're looking at? Okay. So we'll figure it out. But Matt says Tucker Craft or Britton Strange. Full BBR format. I'd probably go ahead. I would take Strange. Austin on the clock. And yeah, if y'all don't know, Underdog has daily drafts. He goes with Jacobs. Do we just double tap Lamb and Evans? I mean, if you look at the rest of the slate, these guys are just going to project out for so many more points than anybody else. So yeah, I think we just double tap Lamb and Evans. Okay. Chris says, my Shakir deflector. Should I trust McMillan over Shakir this? Oh, no. For sure play Shakir over McMillan. Okay. Hogan goes Bucky and McMillan. Do we take Baker and Dowdle? I'm an idiot. I just clicked Love saying Baker out loud. Should have gone Baker. Instead went Love. I'm stupid. Give me the loot, says Mason. Should we start Baker or Daniels this week? 4-point passing touchdown format. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Daniels. And what are the positional requirements, right? Is it one quarterback, one running back, two receivers, a flex, and a tight end? I think that's what it is. Goes Jaden Reed. Do I go Christian Watson or White? Oh, this is it, and we need a tight end. Okay, I would rather have White, especially if it's just a 1v1. I think you just go with whoever has the higher median outcome, and I think it's Rashad White over Christian Watson. And then tight end between Kraft, Ferg. Kraft's more likely to get you the touchdown. We'll go Kraft. I'm feeling good about this. I'm not going to lie. I think having the 2 spot was just much easier position to be in, getting Lamb and Evans in comparison to being stuck with like McMillan, Reed. But here's the squad. And now we have an additional underdog sweat to look forward to here. But let me move over real quick. Let me refresh, see if we have any more questions on the site. Then we can get back to the questions in the live chat. Refresh. We actually do have a couple more coming in. Now, Shamu says 1 running back, 1 flex. Ramadre, Debo, Madison, Condre, and Taylor. Running back, we are going to go through and... Yeah, the 2 spot was overpowered. I'm not going to lie to you, my guy. You didn't really... I kind of botched it going with Love over Baker, but I still think I probably win just because the 2 spot is a little bit OP. But anyway, here for Shamu, we're looking at Ramadre, Ford, both guaranteed workloads. Ford's going to have a better matchup as well as really good receiving usage. So we go Ford. And then I'll just take Ramadre Stevenson down here in the flex. If you wanted to go Taylor, I'm not going to fault you for it. But again, like I said previously, definitely getting scared off with the Taylor projections. Maybe I'm always happy to see you. Let me hook you up with a free start set question. Says, at tight end, are we going to go Kincaid, Strange, or Andrews? I think you have the highest touchdown ceiling with Andrews, but the touchdown rate has looked a little bit unsustainable. I have them kind of ranked back to back. Honestly, I would go with Andrews here. I mean, if you're looking at the target floor that you're going to get, definitely Strange is going to outweigh him. But still. Now, South Philly Josh coming over. Running back, I think we go with Jerome Ford over Taylor Tracy. Down in the flex, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to take Zay Flowers over Tracy and Patrick Taylor as well in a full PPR format. Eric Friedman says, hey Mason, in the semis projected 50-50 this week, half PPR 14-team league facing Jacobs and Saquon. So we are in a little bit of a hole. If we're chasing ceiling, I think I'm probably going to go ahead and take Brees over Aaron Jones. I have them ranked back-to-back currently. I think Jones gives the higher floor. Actually, half PPR format. Half PPR format, the receiving usage won't matter as much. So we're going to go with Brees. We're going to go Jones. A wide receiver, I'm going to play Tyreek Hill and Brian Thomas over Brees Hall. We'll just take both receivers. Now, Die coming through. Running back, we have no Montgomery. So I think you're looking at Swift versus Pacheco and Pollard, I guess. I think you just kind of play it safe with Pacheco. We don't know if Pollard's going to be good to go or not. Swift, not a great matchup or game environment. Going down to tight ends, we're looking at Bowers as just a very easy play. And then down in the flex, I guess we have Swift, Pollard, and then no real interesting receivers. I guess you could consider it Kelsey. But if Pollard plays, I'm going to go Tony Pollard over DeAndre Swift, given the receiving usage. But if you have no Pollard, then I'd pivot over to DeAndre. Big Lou says 5-point passing touchdown. Weather in Seattle could be bad. Quarterback, I think I go ahead. I think we take Sam Darnold. If the weather is horrendous, then of course you can feel free to pivot over to Brock Purdy, but we're going to have a lot more information about that tomorrow. And then going over to tight end, I think you can just play it safe with a Brenton Strange. Again, you just have simply nobody here healthy outside of Strange and Brian Thomas in Jacksonville. But, and again, I do want to reiterate, you actually do have decent little projections here for the offense in Jacksonville in comparison to some of the really bad offenses in the league. But let's move this over. Edison says Ford, Walker, or DK Metcalf. I would go ahead. I'd take Kenneth Walker out of the three. Solomon says Love or Kyler in a 6-point passing touchdown format. I personally would go Kyler, but I've said that a bunch this year and I've been wrong. Random post says, do we start Andrews today or risk Njoku? I would just start Andrews today. If you have like a decent option today, there's no real reason to like really risk much when it comes to David Njoku, in that like the offense is going to be bad now and you're going to have dispersed target share. Mike says Patrick Taylor or Mark Andrews in the flex. Definitely want to go Patrick Taylor. Do not want any tight ends in the flex when we can avoid it. Austin says Tillman is officially out. Rogan says Nick Westbrook, Akine, or Jalen Coker. Pass. No, thank you. I'm not answering that. Jimmy says start Mahomes or AR. 4-point passing touchdown format. Give me Anthony Richardson. Jess says Tyreek Hill or Breece Hall. Give me Tyreek. Pacheco versus Patrick Taylor. Give me Pacheco. Start one, Amon-Ra, Lamb, or Tyreek Hill. I'm going to take Amon-Ra. Austin says, go Vols. Hook'em Horns, the real UT. Hook'em Horns, my friend. Stranger and Njoku, I'm going to go Strange. Zane says Kelsey, Hawkinson, Keenan, Taylor. We need one for the flex. I'm going to go with probably Keenan if it's a full PPR format. Breece or Ford, I'm going to go Breece. Taylor or Harrison, Patrick Taylor or Harrison, up to you. Full PPR format, I would consider the receiver. Again, this is what's scaring me off Taylor. And this is what last minute really got me on Isaac Grindo a few weeks back. Was looking at the projections on Underdog with the pick'ems that they have. Like, this is what's scaring me for Patrick Taylor here, everyone. Higher, lower, I guess maybe he got moved up 37.5 rushing yards. I thought it was like 34.5 earlier, but still, this is terrifying. He almost looks like a committee touchdown or bust back at this point, if that's what the projections are. Teresa says Mahomes or Stafford. I'd probably go Stafford over Mahomes. McLaurin or JSN. I'm going to go JSN because of the matchups, as long as the weather's not horrendous. Bucky or Kyron, for sure Kyron Williams. Cup or Neighbors, give me Neighbors. Terry, Bucky, Mixon, need two. Go Mixon and then flip a coin between Terry and Bucky. But definitely play Mixon even if it's a tough matchup. JSN or Judy, give me JSN. And then it looks like we have kickoff here, ladies and gentlemen. So your boy's going to go hop on his little bike, pedal, 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 and watch some games at the same time, which hopefully should make the time go by fast. But yes, now we got to beat Thomas. We got to take him down. I don't think we really have anybody going in the matchups today, which is a little bit not exciting, but it is what it is. Really do appreciate y'all, of course, and hope that you have a phenomenal day. I mean, we should have a ton of great football games to watch.